is ugly and basic, so I challenged myself to overhaul it in just 1 week. I'm quite proud of what I managed to make, so stick around to see the results. The first thing I did was throw out a few ideas on paper. I knew I wanted to change the aspect ratio of the game from portrait to landscape but still keep that vertical gameplay. So I threw out 2 ideas on how this could work in widescreen. The first one had gameplay in the middle with UI surrounding it, and the second one had gameplay to the left with UI to the right, similar to Toho. The design I ended up going with was gameplay in the center with the UI on both sides. I decided on this because I knew I had more creative freedom with UI being on the left and the right, kind of like a split design. Now I knew what I wanted to do, I further developed with the foundation I had. I wrote a list of what potentially could show in the UI and got to design them, and this is what I came up with. So to the left we have some of the player's information. We have a little player icon which will show the player's character and have different expressions during gameplay depending on what's happening. Right now I've not designed any characters for the game, so I'm just going to use the battleship as a placeholder. There's a similar icon to the player icon, however this will show the current power up that's active. There is a timer to show how long you have left of that power up. Now on the right we have another icon that will show a boss sprite that is also similar to the player one. By the way, it will display different expressions correlating to gameplay. There is also a bit of text that shows the current boss's name. As a placeholder name I came up with Hollow Brain Case because that guy has no brains. Underneath all this there's a life bar for the boss and text showing which is the current wave. Overall I think this design shows off what it needs to pretty well, and it has the potential to just ooze with style. There's 1 or 2 things that I'm not a fan of in terms of the placement of certain details, but I can iterate on that whilst creating the more refined pieces. Onto working digitally now. The first thing I did was take a screenshot from the current game and whack it in a paint.net project. This is what I ended up creating, and as you can see there's obvious differences between the concept sketch and now. First things first, there's borders around everything to keep each individual part in their own area. I moved the power up timer to the right of the text. On the other side I removed the wave text because I thought it was unnecessary. I also rotated the boss's health bar to keep it in shape of the border surrounding it. This was a good start with a lot of room for improvement, but this was a good starting point. Before continuing, I wanted to see what other people thought of the concept, so I sent it off to a few of my friends to see what they thought. The main feedback that I did get was there should be background to separate the gameplay from the rest of the UI, so that's what I decided to work on next. Doing the background for the gameplay was quite simple. I made a basic checkered pattern as I didn't want it to be too distracted from the main gameplay, which I think this works pretty well for. Now the UI background. I tried multiple different ideas but nothing was sticking, and this was really frustrating. I'm not too much of an artist, as you could probably tell from my amazing sketches, and that made this way more difficult. And after a few days of genuinely losing my mind, I came up with an idea. While studying game development in college, we were taught this method of creating textures by taking pictures of real life objects and then using software to make them into textures. I thought about how I could use this line of thinking for creating backgrounds for my game, so I came up with a plan. This plan was to take some photos and edit them to look like a kind of dark liminal space kind of image. The best part about this is it didn't have to look perfect whilst creating it, as it was going to be downscaled to remove any imperfections to fit the game resolution as well. So I went on a walk around some factories surrounded by nature near my house and got a few pictures. I knew I needed something additional, so when I got home I took a few pictures of a skull keychain that I have. The plan for these photos was to crop them, remove the background and have a pile of skulls kind of in the corner. Here is the first mock-up of the background, and as you can see I darkened the image and added a pile of grey-scaled skulls to the right. I personally didn't like this background. I thought the skulls stuck out a bit too much. So in the second mock-up I darkened the skulls to fit in with the lighting of the rest of the scene, and now I have something to work with. I downscaled this mock-up and put it in with the rest of the design, as to not make it look like just a downscaled image. I added a fragment blur which gave a really creepy look to it. This effect makes the skulls look like damned souls screaming out for help, which I think fits the game story pretty well. More on the game story in a later devlog. I'm excited to do that one. Alright, the design process is done, which took way longer than I expected. Now, all I have to do is implement this into the game. which should be the easy part, right? It is now fully implemented, minus a few placeholder images. I want to go over some details that I've either changed or added during development. Firstly, I have NA displayed when there's no power-up active, as opposed to just having blank text. I changed the font to everything because the font I was using in the mockups just looked like utter shit. I made the background on the gameplay scroll by using a tile sprite and constantly changing its Y offset value. Pretty simple one for those of you who use GDevelop. I also added a cool little effect to the boss's health bar when transitioning into the boss. So after all these setbacks, it was the end of the 7 days of developing. And to be honest, I'm quite proud of what I managed to do. Yeah, it still looks rough, but it's a good foundation to create something absolutely stunning on. I already have so many crazy and unique ideas I want to add to just the style of this game, like the UI, gameplay, everything. So if that interests you, maybe consider subscribing and sticking around. With that, I'm done, and I'll see you all later in the next video.